And we're back with our third video of the roguelike series. So for those of you that are new to this channel as well as to the series, please make sure you watch the previous two videos. We're building a roguelike game, dungeon-based crawler, and we're on our third part of the series where we're going to be focusing again on enemies as well as the spawn mechanism, just enhancing that. So today's video is purely going to be an enhanced version of what we currently have by just bringing in some of the big building blocks that we need to chip away with essentially. So we're going to smack straight back into that, as well as we're going to be adding just one or two little fixes just to continuously juice up our game as we progress. So first and foremost, on the layout level, let's go ahead and add a new sprite. We haven't done the animations yet with regards to the enemies, so I'm going to go ahead and add a sprite. And I've just gone and collected a sprite from the template I did provide. This one, I'm not sure if it's from the template, but there's so many different enemies you guys can make use of. I've got a little batch here that I've gone and added. And we're going to go ahead and just change this to a walking so that we keep it for our state machine. And there is our little bat. Great. The next thing I want to do, and somebody commented this earlier with regards to the collisions. Yes, the collision is slightly bigger than the enemy offset, but it's only because, as I mentioned in the beginning, we haven't set this. But we can go ahead and set this. And for the sake of this video, I think because this sprite is a 16 by 16, we could set it 16 by 16, which is, you know, the full collision width of that sprite, or set it slightly smaller, which is what I do prefer doing. Same with the enemy sprite, because we spawn that programmatically on our objects. We need to move everything to objects, but we're going to go ahead and just do the same here as well. And this keeps it smaller than the actual animation itself. Okay, so now that we've got our, you could say, animation, we're going to go ahead and tie it to the animation. But before we do that, we need to do a few things. We need to go ahead and add the pin behavior, because the pin behavior it sort of pins it to the collision block of the enemy. So let's go ahead and add a behavior, and in this case let's call it the pin behavior. And there we can see we've got our pin behavior. Then we're going to do another thing and just set this collision. We want to go and set that to invisible, because currently it's not invisible, because you don't want to see the collisions behind the animation. But this is theoretically what you're going to be interacting with when you do go ahead and kill this enemy. So we're going to go back to our event sheet, and then down below where we've got the spawn of the AI, we're going to go and do that on the created side of things, that we go and add the creation of the enemy sprite. So yeah, quite simple. We can say on created, move towards the player. This we're going to move out eventually, but let's leave it there for now. I'm going to go ahead and just say create, and I'll move that above. I'm going to go system, and we're going to go create an object. And we're going to say this object needs to be the sprite, which I'm going to rename now as well. This can be on the base level, which I think we've set to 0, which is fine. And the x coordinates here needs to logically be obviously the enemy collision. So you can just type it up and it'll sort of bring it up for you guys. Enemy collision.x, and then obviously enemy collision.y. Great. So there's the enemy collisions. That'll then go created. I'm just going to move that up. The next thing we need to do is we need to pin that behavior. So then we can say sprite, and we're going to say pin, and we're going to pin this to an object. We're going to say pin to an object, and in this case we're going to say the enemy collision, and we're going to uncheck the angle, because we don't want to move to the angle of that. And this is the reason now why I prefer to have an enemy collision opposed to the animation having the move to ability, because of the fact that it turns the sprite around, and then you need to do quite a lot of offsetting and checking to see at which angle the animation is. But by having an enemy collision, this little block that we created in the video 1, by having that manage the angles invisible behind the scene, you're not subjective to having to lay out more events to get the sprite to look decent when it is moving around the map. So I'm just going to go straight back to the layout. I'm going to name this bat for now so that we have context, otherwise we get lost. And let's go ahead and just run that quickly. This should give us a better overview of, sorry, let's do it again. Better overview of when they spawn. Okay, there you can see the animation has stopped playing, but in theory they did come, and you'll notice that when I do destroy them, the animations remain behind. So we're going to go ahead and correct that. So firstly, we need to do a few things. We need to click on the layout, then click on the sprite, and make sure that the walking animation is in loop, because as long as the state is continuously walking, we don't need to worry. So that'll keep the animation flying. The next thing we need to do is come back to our layout, and I want to create a new instance variable, and I want to create an instance variable called state. We spoke about the state machine, and we want to know that when an enemy is idling, when it's attacking, that we know exactly what animation to play. So now that we've got our state, we need to do now a few other things. I want to go ahead and add another variable to the animation, which will probably be the enemy collision UID. But before we get that, because what we want to do is that when you destroy this enemy here, you're passing, as you saw here, the instance UID. But now we also need to destroy the bat as well as the collision. So I'm going to go ahead and just add it over here and say bat destroy. And let's just see if it picks it up. We might have to pass this instance UID by storing it on the animation. But let's take a look and see if that does work. It could work because it's on collision with the bullet, so that it knows. So let's just click on layout 1 and play that. Let's wait for our bats to spawn. Okay, great. So that should work. I'm going to wait for 2 to come just to see if they don't all both die. You see, there's the problem that I was referring to. If they both, or one gets shot, they all die. See, there it is. Although the collision is still there. So we need to go and fix that. So let's hop back over to our code, and let's go to the animation, and I'm going to go ahead and add an instance variable to this animation. And the instance variable is going to be, let's call it, for the sake of this, call it enemy UID. And I want to track this enemy UID. Everything based on this UID I want to know. So now that I've got the enemy UID tracked, the next thing that I want to go and do is I want to set this UID on creation. So when this enemy is created, go and set the UID. So let's go animation. We're going to set a variable. Now there's many ways that you can do this. This is just a preferred method that I am. Again, guys, there's many ways to kill a cat, presumably. I'm going to set the value, and then I'm going to set it to the enemy base collision UID of this spawn instance. So collision base dot UID. Now I know that I'm pulling this reference across. The UID created on the instance is also then stored in this value of this instance variable that we created. Okay, so overhead on the destroy, we've got here, you can see the on created, we've set the pin. Now what we need to do is inform it that on the, you could say, death of this enemy, we need to pick that instance with that enemy UID and then begin the you could say destroy of the animation as well. So what I like to do here is when you pick the instance, just go ahead and add another sub event. Just go add sub event, and here we're just going to say bat ID, and then we compare that variable. So we're just going to say compare instance variable, and we say enemy UID is equal to, and we're going to use the variable that we are passing, and that will be enemy, that'll be enemy UID. Now I'll explain again this just to refresh your memory. On this function we created 2 parameters, one being the enemy UID. That is the one we're passing. Now based on the fact that that is the one that we're passing, we can then use that in reference to any other value or sub-event. So now I can drag that across and I can put it in here. Now it knows that this is the enemy in question. It's UID, it's unique ID identification number. That once this unit is shot, destroy its base, as well as going to destroy it because now we've got a reference to it. Okay, so now if we shoot that now, we should destroy 1. So I'm going to wait for 2 to come on the screen. There's our first little guy. There's 2, and now if I shoot him, you'll see only the 1 died. I shot 2 bullets there. There's 2 overlapping. And if I shoot this guy, you'll see now they're all stand. Now we've got track basically of each one theoretically, which is fantastic. Now we're slowly making headways. Okay, great. So we can go ahead and just going to say save that. Don't forget to save just on that point, because how often now I've done work and then, not gone ahead and saved the work that I've gone created. Right, so now that we are able to create it, destroy it, and we've got our move to ability. What we also want to do here is on the creation, I want to do one more thing. I want to go and set on this collision the state, the new state machine. So we're going to go here and we're going to say set a value, and I'm going to say state, and I'm going to say the state here, the minute he gets cracking, call it walking. Okay, so we're going to have to just use that because it's a string, and we're going to say it's walking. I'm happy with walking. Now we can add line of sight, but because it's a, you could say, dungeon crawler, he's going to have line of sight anyway. But if you want to bring in obstacles and walls, and you don't want him to see you, and you want to hide, for instance, on a cliff or anything as such, then the line of sight behavior is probably going to be in your best interest. But we might actually add it in the context of where we're going. Let's do the whole suite, and then you guys can just take out from what you need, opposed to me giving you one specific method to it. Okay, so now we've got our spawning, we've set the state, and then the animation is currently set to walking because it's the only animation, but I'm going to just go ahead here and add a brand new group. We could keep this in enemy AI. In fact, let's do that. Let's keep it in enemy AI. What we're going to do here, we're going to say basically we want to work now with the collision. So we're going to go system, and we're going to say for each, use the for each method, and in this case, we could use, yeah, let's rather do this. Will this work? Yeah, this should be fine. Let's say the for each, and we're going to go with for every enemy collision, we want to do something. We want to do stuff that is continuously triggering. And the first one that we want to do is we want to check states. So we're going to go add a sub event, and we're going to say enemy collision, and we compare a state, compare an instance variable, and we're going to go state is equal to, and the first one being walking, just so we can start getting our code clean. If the state is walking, I want you to then set the bat, and we're going to do this programmatically, set its animation, set the animation, and then we're going to set it to the enemy collision dot state. Sorry, dot state. And you can save. Just make sure that this is a string variable, not a numbers variable. I think I might have created it in the beginning as a number, but I did change it to a string. So just make sure that's correct. All right, so now that the state is walking, we're telling the animation, look, the state of this enemy is walking. You can set this animation to basically walking animation. Now, nothing should change in what we had because we've only got one animation, but at least when we bring in the attacking animation, we also then have the opportunity to set that motion to attack once the state is attacking. So if the little, you can say, creature's on us and he's within certain range, and again, we're going to be doing that in separate videos. The attack animation, we're slowly just building up and chipping away all the events that is needed for your roguelike. Okay, so now that we've got animation and it is correctly handled by the state, we can now at any point say, you know, as I mentioned, change the state and handle the animations without having to revisit this all again. As we get different animations, we just slot them all in below. So this is a nice clean way of managing code the correct way. However, there's a few things now we have to do. We have to now also set the way that the enemy, you could say, animation is handled, because what's going to happen now is if I'm on the left of this enemy here, he's only looking this way, but if I come to this side, you'll notice he doesn't change. The animation doesn't change at all. So we want this eyeball, you could say, to look to me this way, and when I'm on this side, I want it to look at me this way. So what we do for that is quite a quick fix. All we need to do is compare the X indexes between the player as well as the enemy. And because we've got this now for each that is currently going, and it's set to its walking, we need to do the same. So here we can just add a sub event. And again, I know this is tedious, but at least once you have this all set up, you don't need to revisit this. And this keeps everything very tidy with regards to enemy collisions. Because the most important thing that's about this enemy collision that's not on the animation, when you apply this collision for all your enemies, everything is applied. We just manage and maintain a family for animations. Again, I'm going to show you the change of code as we progress, but I want to just bring the basic building blocks towards you guys to the forefront, and then we're going to start altering our code, fixing some of the spaghetti things, and making sure that the code itself is presentable as well as recyclable. Okay, so we're going to go ahead now and just say we're going to do a compare. When you say compare, in this case, a value, which I think will be, what's going to be, let's just go with, I think we need to do the X value, that's correct. So we're going to say compare the X value, and what I want to do here is I want to make sure it's smaller than, less than the player. So in this case, I'm going to go player collision dot X, right? That'll be the first one. That'll tell me, and then what I need to also do is check if it's greater than. We could do an else here, but in this case, I'm just going to go copy and paste that, double click this, and change this and swap it to the greater or equal, because if he's exactly equal above you, you want to make sure that that's handled correctly. And then all we want to do here is just go and say bat, and I'm going to then say set mirrored. In this case, I'm going to say not mirrored, because that's the left hand side, and then copy that and then set this to mirrored for the right hand side. Let's take a look now and see what that looks like. And again, apologies if I'm bouncing around. Yeah, I'm sort of coding this on the fly. I've got nothing to reference it to. So there you can see eyeballs facing me, come this side. There you see now he's looking this side. So now it makes a little bit sense that I'm this side and they should all, that's it. They're all looking to me this side. If I go this side, they should turn. And there you can see they now turn. Now you could put this on every tick. That makes it a little bit more realistic. But this should work. Great. We probably will handle it maybe later on in every tick situation. Fantastic. All right, so now that we've got that handled, the other thing that we're going to want to do is also maybe manage a few other things with regards to our enemies to make things a little bit more natural. Now, I spoke of the line of sight. I think let's go ahead and add it, because I do remember we have this little wall here. In case you want to bring out a number of objects that gives you high ground, let's go and do that. So let's go ahead and add on the player collision. And again, the reason why we've got this layout, guys, is to keep and store all of these objects that I'm going to move later, because we want a dynamic spawning system, not something that's dropped on the layout. So this will all come here eventually, but we'll tidy up what we need. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and here, I'm just going to add the line of sight variable behavior, excuse me. And we can use this for a number of things. That if he's got line of sight with us, do certain attacks, because currently on creation, we're just saying, look, move to this player, but we don't want to do that. We want to say that if this is within, you could say walking, as we created our state, now we want to move the player. So if the state is walking, move to the player, if that makes sense. So on creation, we've got walking. However, if I go ahead and set this to idle, just to show you guys the state, the power of the state machine. If I set that to idle now, there won't be any animation, and on spawn, they'll stand still. They won't move towards you. So see, stand still. Yeah, it's playing the default animation, which is okay because it only has one. But you'll notice it stands still now. So if I go back to the bat and I say, create a new animation, add animation, and I'm going to call this idle. And I've got nothing here. It's basically going to be blank, if that makes sense. But this is a great way of handling all your different, you could say, animations. But in this case, you know, the bat really idling is him flying. So we can go ahead and delete that. But your enemies in general, you get the idea. You'll have all your different animations. All right, so coming back to this, what we're going to do here is we're going to do a few things. We want to give it that if he's got line of sight, come over towards us. Now we've already moved it to the state machine. So if he's walking, manage it correctly. As I mentioned before, your attack, your idle, and everything will come down below, which is fantastic. So let's go ahead and do the following. Let's go and say, look, for each enemy, let's just do this. For each enemy, add a sub-event, toggle, add sub-event, and we're going to say the enemy collision. I'm going to say has line of sight of object. Okay, and that object is obviously player collision. So now we underneath, just make sure that it's under the for each, guys. This is quite critical. If it's outside, only one enemy is going to be applied to. So when he's got the line of sight, there's a few things you want to do. You want to basically say enemy set my state, because that's what really it does. So instead of having it on the creation, rather move it when it's got line of sight, because you don't want, when he spawns, you don't want him to come immediately. When he spawns, you want him to be an idle. So in this case, we're saying on line of sight, go ahead and set you to walking. Now, in theory, this does a few things. Let me just show you quickly. The guy behind the wall, if we take this wall, make this a little bit longer, these two should not attack me, only this one should. So let's go ahead and just play that quickly. Right, see, he spawns because he can't see me. This guy comes towards me. Now this gives your game another variable in theory to basically add elements to it. Are you going to put this on a, you know, like a place where he's invulnerable to this? So if I come down here and he sees me, then these guys will start coming, which is fantastic, right? Which makes it a little bit more realistic in theory. So again, let's reiterate what the state machine does. If it's got line of sight, set it to walking, and then once you set it to walking, it just bang, bang, bang. It runs all the features without you having to copy and paste all these features. All you're going to do with enemies is change their states. Now what we can say is we can do an invert here and say, if he doesn't see me, set him to idle, because we want to manage, you know, that expectation as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this and paste it. Sorry, twice there. I'm going to say invert this. I'm going to say invert. If he does not have line of sight, set him to idle. Now he's idling already because obviously he's walking, but now at least with the idle, I know it's there. It's something that I can use later down in the line. Once, like I mentioned you guys, you can bring in animations. Okay, great. So we've got, if he's got line of sight, you know, and so forth. The next thing that we can do is manage the attacking, you could say, movement. That if he is overlapping me, go ahead and attack, or if he's within a range of me, go ahead and attack. Alright, so let's go ahead and do it this way. If we go on the line of sight, if he's got line of sight, let's go ahead and sub-event, and let's measure the distance between the two of them. So we're going to say add another sub-event. Sub-event, and yeah, we're going to go system, compare two values. Okay. And yeah, we're going to do the following, which I think that, let me just try to think what the best way would be. Let's do distance. So we're going to go distance, just a built-in function, and we're going to compare the x and y of the player as well as the enemy collision. So we're going to go enemy collision.x, and we want to and let's also take the y because it can be above us, so it needs to be a 360 degree. So let's go enemy collision.y, and then what we want to do, and you can just use commas to move on to the next one. We want to check that against the player collision dot x, and then also furthermore against the player collision dot y, and I think that will do it for us. Okay, so we're checking the distance between those two, and now we want to say compare those two. So we're going to say, look, in this case of the bat, maybe we want the bat to shoot a fireball, which we can do in this instance. We're going to say, look, when he gets within 40 pixels of us, I want you to stop this bat and then let the bat begin the attack animation. So let's go ahead and say less or equal to 50 or 40, we said, and then we can change the state of the bat. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just move this out a little bit so it's nice and clean. So go ahead and copy this here, state to walking, and I'm going to move across here. I'm going to change it to, you guessed it, attack. Now we know the attack formation has begun. Now we don't have a state for the attack. I think we'll do that in our next video because the video is getting quite long. What we'll do is we'll just create a new state, and we'll just go, for instance, you can just copy paste this, delete this here, and then obviously delete this as well. But when the state is equal to attack, we want it to do something, and in this case I want him to stop. So that's the first, you could say, movement. So I'm going to say enemy collision, and I want to say the move to, and I want you to stop. That's the first thing, and then begin the animation. You with me? And then the same thing applies here. We're going to take the animation and we're going to just copy and paste it straight in there because it'll play based on that. It goes and sets it accordingly. Now we don't have an attack animation. We will do that maybe in the next video and once we juice it up. But this, at least now, our state machine has come together. So if we go ahead and play this now, we know that when he stops, his state's going to be attack. And he should not now overlap me. He should get close, but he should stop. And there you go. So now he begins the attacking formation. He's looking at us, and it keeps it really nice and clean. If we destroy him, he dies. And this is a great way to now slowly make sure that your code is clean and in a manageable way. Alright guys, let's wrap it up there and let's call it for video number 3. I'll bring out the next video and we'll obviously advance further on this, and we slowly bring it together the right way, as well as I'll work a little bit more on the animations with you guys, and we'll bring the game slightly to life. The next part I was hoping to get to was the wave instances with the difficulty, but let's just get enemies completed. We might just do 2, day and a night, as well as the wave, and then that should be a good foundation and base for us then to begin screen shake and a few other great variables that make these roguelikes look awesome. Well guys, that's it for me. If you are new to this channel, if you could hit that little subscribe